Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Redeem Her Time podcast. I love when we get to have amazing women come share our time with us together on an episode. And Brittany Braswell and I have been hanging out a little bit here, getting to know each other. And I love her heart for the Lord. I love her heart for helping women to be intentional. And she's kind of got a two-pronged thing that she's doing. But we're really going to be focusing today on how we can scale without hiring because she has a very unique way in which she helps you do strategic delegation to free up not only time, but also bandwidth. So you can really lead and show up like a CEO. And we all know that as business owners, we're holding a lot in our heads, Brittany. So if we can figure out how to
Yes.
strategically delegate some of that and free up some bandwidth and some time, it will make a difference. So let's just start off. I want to get to know you a little bit. Welcome to the
Yeah.
Redeemer Time podcast. Just start by telling us about you. Maybe what all are you juggling in this season of life? This is coming out in early June, so you're probably in the throes of summer. And what does that look like
Yes.
for you this year?
Oh my goodness. Yes. So listen, like you mentioned, I do have kiddos. I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Two of them are home full time for summer. And then one I trek back and forth with a little commute to daycare each day to try to keep his schedule normal while I have loud, rambunctious kiddos running around at home. So normally during a school year, I have 18 hours, give or take 18 to 20 hours to work. And this summer I have about 5 or 6. So I'm getting real strategic
As
and
to say, it's
intentional with
yes.
stewarding my time well and making sure I'm prioritizing. You use the orange and Skittle example a lot. I prioritize those oranges, and the Skittles just either get delegated or they wait till the fall.
Yeah.
So that's what I am in the midst of juggling right now. And I have, like you said, I have kind of two sides of my business. So my degree, education, training, expertise started in nutrition and dietetics. So I am a licensed registered dietitian. I primarily specialize in working with women who struggle with disordered eating, unhealthy relationship with food, really negative body image. I've been doing that for the age myself, 13 or 14 years now. And then I also, for the last 2 years or so, have been consulting and working with other business owners when it comes to how to strategically delegate to get your time and capacity back, and doing
Mm.
so using a structured, profitable, impactful internship program. I've been working with interns almost longer than I've been a dietitian. And so I have really transitioned into just have such a love and a heart for women who have been in this season where you are wearing all the hats and you're doing all the things and you love what you do and you don't want to burn it out. I
Mm.
have been there, done that. And there's a better way to do it. So that is something that the Lord has just really called me into in this season, is to really pour into other Christian business owners, and really help them learn how to steward their time in a really unique way that not a lot of people talk about. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to get into that a little bit today.
Yeah, I love it. And I'd love to hear a little bit of your story, whatever part of it you want to tell us. Like what first made you realize that you couldn't do it all? It wasn't going to be sustainable. You were, leading, like you said, to burnout and things like that, probably not as
Yeah.
present as home as you wanted to be. Like whatever parts of your journey you want to share, just like how did God bring you to, saying this, there has to be a different way.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I think kids will teach you that pretty quickly, that the time you think you have has to be treated differently. But where it really started showing up for me is when I started my private practice. It was back in 2020. I'd been a dietitian for years at this point, but I transitioned from working full time in an eating disorder treatment center setting into private practice. And at the time, COVID was ramping up, and my first official office was literally in my garage. And I'm not talking about like beautiful Pinterest perfect garage, finished walls. It was like dead heat in the middle of Alabama summer. And I had a fold out card table I had borrowed from my parents. I had a folding metal chair, and I cleared off just enough space on the wall behind me to hang up random wall decorations still sitting in our house so it would look like a finished space. Had a small desk fan sitting on my little fold out table, blowing air in my face with the garage door up to try and keep from overheating. And I had to do all of this because with COVID, both of my kiddos were home. Daycares were closed. And at the time, I was working in a very sensitive space. We have HIPAA regulations, which is really just all about client privacy. And so I had to make sure nobody could hear me talk. I had to make sure that nobody could hear my clients talk. So I was sitting out in the garage, beating sweat most days. There was construction happening in the neighborhood. So construction trucks were going up and down my street. And I only had limited time because my husband was also working from home. Praise Jesus that we could both be there. And we were trading off with who's taking care of kids, who's on a call or a
Mm.
meeting, so we had to be really careful with scheduling my sessions with my clients and work calls. And I had to be a little more flexible because some of his calls he could not schedule. He wasn't working for himself. He was working with a large company in our area. And so I had to move some things around sometimes. And so I was going back and forth from mom to dietitian to social media marketer to email manager to back to mom again, back to clinician. And I was wearing 17 hats, like so many of us do,
Yeah.
especially in the online business and in the earlier, maybe even later stages of business when you either don't want to hire a team or you're not sure your capacity is there for it, or you feel like, well, it's just faster if I do it,
Mm.
or maybe your income isn't consistent enough. And so I was in that place where I had revenue coming in, but it wasn't always consistent, it wasn't predictable. And so I didn't feel comfortable hiring a team, but I knew I had to have some help. So I loved what I
Mm.
did. And I did not want to be a statistic and burn out in the first year or two of business. I knew that I was in a place the Lord had called me to, and I knew I had women to serve, and that if I wasn't there serving them, hopefully they would still find treatment somewhere. But I knew very few dietitians at the time who practiced from a Christ-centered standpoint. And so I was like, I've got to delegate some things because because come in after, my random pockets of time to do sessions. And I remember one day I was sitting on the couch and my son was sitting on the other couch across from me, 2 years old at the time. And he had pulled out my husband's guitar and just like strumming it and singing some worship song that we had playing on YouTube that day. And I remember him, Melissa, looking at me going, "Mommy, mommy, watch me play." And he had to ask me multiple times because I didn't look for my phone the first couple of times because I was trying to squeeze in that extra,
Mm.
2 minutes to send an email or respond to a client inquiry. And I just remember him looking at me like asking me over and over again. And I started to feel irritated at first, like, why is he keeping, asking me to look at him? And then I realized he just wants me to watch him play. Like he's so happy and he's sitting over there expecting me to be a present mom, and I was anything but. And so that was a huge wake up call moment for me going, I need to be able to leave leave the work, leave the computer there when I get up to go inside. And I didn't have a commute. I didn't have that wind down time to transition from work mode to mom mode. It had to be somewhat instant. And I had to start finding ways to do that. So that was really the moment where I was like, something's got to change.
I wish I could say I can't resonate with that. I too way too much, right? I was the mom who would bring her laptop to a family movie night, and I'm just over here doing one more thing, and I'm in the room, like you said. But often, that one more thing we all know turns into oftentimes more than we think. And
Yeah.
even what I find, and this is a recent conversation we had on the podcast, is sometimes the laptop is closed, or maybe even the phone is put away, and yet it's still going on up here, right? Because
Yes.
we're thinking about all the different tasks, all the different roles we're playing and things like that. And,
Yeah.
as business owners, we don't have the luxury of just, clocking out and, like you said, commuting home. And now we don't have to think about it until the next day, or at least we don't think we can. So
Yes.
let's lean into this because I think so many women are probably listening right now going, okay, Brittany, yeah, this is me. Whether you've got little kids at home or your kids are grown like mine, like I think we all tend to wear all the hats in our business. And, like you said, we think that we just have to keep doing everything because either it just feels like it's just a little thing, so what's the big deal? Or we feel like
Yeah.
we can't afford it. So let's talk about that. Why do you think business owners stay stuck in doing everything themselves, even when they know it's exhausting them? Maybe they're already starting to see signs of some of the burnout or the way it's distracting them. Yeah, why do you think that happens for us? Maybe even if it relates somehow to us being believers doing this in our business.
Yeah. I'm gonna back up just a smidge from this because I think what I needed to hear earlier on in my practice is that the most dangerous person in a small business is a highly competent CEO who never learned to stop proving it. And
Ooh.
so when you are a prover, when that is how maybe you don't even realize that is the identity or the seat that you're sitting in that you have put on yourself. For the prover, everything depends on you because you need it to,
Hmm.
because you're not just doing the work, you are proving something. Maybe you are proving it to your clients or to your industry, or maybe just to yourself. And so I think that's where, especially as Christian women, we want to be strong and we want to be capable and we want to prove to ourselves or to our family, sometimes our colleagues, that like I can handle this. I can be the mom and the business owner and all of the things. I can do them all well. And you probably can do most of them really well. And so when you are in that Kruger state, you are highly competent. You probably develop a lot of skills. I got pretty darn good at email marketing and going back and forth between serving my clients super well. And I wasn't an expert. I had a degree in dietetics and nutrition sciences, but I had been spending time and money and coaching, learning so much of the business side. And so for me, I had to prove to myself, I can do business. I'm not just a dietitian. I can do the
Mm.
business thing. I can do the private practice thing. And I loved it and I wanted to be successful at it. But I think that's where so many business owners get stuck and they don't always see it as stuck. They're just like, I've got to be here. I've got to do this. It depends on me. I can do it, so I should be doing it. Nobody can do it
Mm.
better than me, or I don't need to give anybody else the chance. Sometimes we approach this from a fear standpoint and we go, what if somebody else can do it better than me? I'm not bringing anybody else in that can do that because I don't want to. We put those little pride hats on and we just want to prove to ourselves, nope, this is mine. I can do it. I can handle it.
Wow, that's such an interesting way to look at it because I think so often we say I'm afraid to hand this over to someone else that they won't do it as well as I can. But I think you're right. Like what if they can? What if I'm not as needed as I think I am? And I think maybe this is where our identity gets way too much connected to what we do. My CEOs and I are reading a book called Healthy Calling right now, and talking about
Mm.
when our work is a calling, that it's a gift, right? It's one thing for, you work for a paycheck and you're just punching a clock and you're just putting in your time and you go home and, it doesn't define who you are. But I think for so many of my listeners, what I heard you share in your story, you're not just a dietitian, like it's a calling in the way that you're helping people to steward their health, their body, their wellness. And
Mhm.
so there is this like urgency, there is this sense of responsibility, there's this like passion in you, and that's a good thing, but there's also a toxic side of it where then we don't know when to stop, right? And
Yeah.
we put everything on just how important that is to maybe the detriment or cost of other things that do matter in our lives. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then we're in a place where we're of no use to anybody, whether it's our
Right.
clients or whether it's our family and things like that. So, what might be
Yeah.
some signs that a woman who's listening today has become the biggest bottleneck in her own business? What are some things she can start like noticing, looking for, the kind of go, wait, maybe there is an issue here and I can't keep doing it all.
Oh, yes, listen, I love that term bottleneck because it is it's such a convicting kind of phrase. Like, oh gosh, thought my bottleneck was my time, but for business owners, this is the hard thing. And I say this with love because I've been here, is that we are often the bottleneck, not just our time, right? You talk so much about ROTI, right? Return on time investment. And when you are in business, especially when you are a solopreneur, or maybe you have one or two contract positions, you only have time and capacity to a certain ceiling, right? To make your business run, maybe to make it grow to a certain level. And even if you're not trying to scale your business to multi seven figures or something like that, you still only have, again, so much, not just time, but capacity. And so you usually spend a lot of time working in your business instead of on it. And when that happens, we end up going through the motions of day-to-day business operations and all of the ins and outs, getting in the weeds of things instead of being really excited to show or sell our offers and serve our people really
Mm.
well. And I got stuck in that a little bit, a lot of it, early on because I had a certain feeling about selling until I realized what I am offering. I'm not trying to be pushy or shove something on somebody, but being excited to talk about the impact and the transformation that I knew my program could offer switched things for me. And when I got excited about, I need to let more people know about this. But if you are a business owner with a high level of integrity, which if you're listening to this show, I'm sure that you are, then you don't want to do things that are going to sacrifice the level at which you serve your clients.
Hmm.
Because if you feel like no one can do certain aspects of your job as well as you, or maybe you're convinced again that you can just do it faster, I want you, I want you to hear me again. I lovingly say this. It's not faster to do it yourself if you do it forever. And you significantly limit your impact and the calling that if the Lord has called you into owning the business that you do, and you know that there's a kingdom impact that you have the potential to be the one to walk out, then there are certain things that only you can do with your voice, your expertise, your licensure, depending on what type of area you're in. Lots of other things can be delegated that are going to further that impact.
Yeah. And I love that reminder. I mean, you hit on this earlier, right? Like you have a passion for whatever the area is that you serve, not necessarily
Mhm.
for all the business elements of it. And yet what
Yeah.
happens is so much more of our time gets spent on the business elements of it and not the passion part of it. And so when I
Right.
work with clients, we look at what are your CEO tasks? So in my world, we've redefined a CEO as a Christ empowered operator, right? So as this person who's been entrusted with this calling in this particular area to serve this, particular group of people, what are the things that God has uniquely gifted and equipped you to do that only you can do, right? Versus all the non-CEO tasks, which may be very important. There are some that probably
Yeah.
just don't need to happen to anyone, but by anyone. But there are ones where like, okay, somebody else could do this just as well. Or even if they were hitting it like 70, 80% of what you think you could do.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
imagine how that can free up, right? So that you can focus on the CEO tasks. And I love how you talked about the difference between working on your business versus in your business, because I think if we were to really sit down and audit our time,
Hmm.
chances are a lot of it is going to, like you said, the day-to-day operations, which are good and important and necessary, and yet, right, not the things, those are things that we can delegate. So I love that you're
Yeah.
like, okay, we don't have to do it all. We can't do it all. We do have a capacity. We
Right.
do have other callings in life and things like that. So let's kind of start going into how you've been able to figure out the solution, how you're helping other people. I know you teach strategic delegation, so we're not just throwing tasks at somebody and hoping it works, right?
Right.
Building a really
The
intentional
recipe for
internship.
disaster.
Exactly, right? So yeah, unpack what this means to like strategically delegate, to start, creating this intern-based team. What does that mean? What does it look like? Why is this such a powerful option for growing a business, especially for somebody that maybe feels like she doesn't know if she's ready to officially hire on people yet?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think one of the things that stops people so often from bringing on help, and especially I love this when it comes to interns. If you have never led someone before, especially in a business capacity, the fear of what if I don't lead well? Or sometimes it's just a knowledge gap where it's like you don't know how to set things up and structure things in a way that are going to make this successful. Well, at whatever point you bring somebody on, paid, unpaid, hired contractor intern, you're going to have a way to bring them on, like to interview or to do whatever your onboarding process is, to structure what they're going to do for you. And too often we wait until we feel confident that okay, I know everything's running well, I can lead this well, and that's like backwards thinking because
Mm.
bringing on interns allows you to develop the leadership skills that's going to build your confidence and your abilities as a CEO. So when it comes to interns, and especially when it comes to if you have any fears or hesitations around the financial impact of what if my profit margins really drop because I start paying a contract person? Or what if I know I have certain months where maybe I'm doing launches or promotions and those are higher revenue months, but I might not be able to afford them on the in between months? Bringing on interns gives you very like zero financial risk. Unless you decide you can always choose to pay your interns. I teach
Mm.
it in an unpaid capacity, but it's very low financial risk to bring on an intern as opposed to a paid contractor, especially when you don't have that predictability or consistency of income. And it also gives you a much lower pressure means of developing and refining your processes without the headache of, you know, payroll or paying someone
Mm.
to train them essentially as you go. Because once you bring someone on, you got a hired paid contractor, you got to pay them through the training process as well. And that can go differently, as far as pay rates go during a training period versus full work week or whatever you have it structured as. But the thing that I think the thing that I love most when it comes to internships is it really it really made me like initially go, I actually feel like a CEO. I'm actually
Mm.
starting to move into the mindset and the behaviors of someone who is leading a company rather than someone who is just managing it. You and
Mm.
I just talked a little
Yes.
more before we hit record about the difference in managing and stewarding something. And I was so much in the seat of, I'm managing this company. I'm in control of it. Everything goes through me. And that was a huge limitation for me. And when you bring on interns, there's something about an intern versus a paid contractor where they have a greater level of buy-in, which most people don't think. Most people think, well, how do I
Mm.
get them to do work or contribute if they're not being paid? That's a whole conversation. You usually have more buy-in than paid contractor because you are pouring into them in a way that allows you to steward your business, your time, and your business revenue and income and your relationships. It
Mm.
opens up so much more opportunity for stewardship. So I feel like that's kind of the big picture of things, but that's what I lead other business owners and show them how can you create more capacity for yourself, building up. It's not always the next generation. I've had interns of all different ages and stages and professionals in the working environment that have interned with me. And there's so many blessings and so much joy that comes from that process if you set it up well from the beginning.
Mm. I love how you pointed out, like it makes you start showing up as that CEO, as that leader, as that person who's thinking about, how do I define roles? How do I lead someone well? How do I help them, to refine their skills and to grow as a person and things like that? And that is that next level of business leadership. I'm not just over here checking boxes, hoping it works. Right now,
Mhm.
you're entrusting, and there is a little bit of that, that fear, that letting go of like entrusting a task into someone else's hands. But wouldn't you say that more often than not, maybe after you get past that initial, handing it over, it's like, handing the
Yeah.
keys to your kid, your oldest when they start driving, and you have that like, but then you're like, wow, it's really freeing that they can actually get themselves to practice or to church or whatever. Uh,
Yeah.
once you do that, yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And here's what I found because I utilized interns as well. And
Okay.
what I love, and I love that you said this, like there's oftentimes a buy-in. I always go into my community first before I go
Yes.
outside because there's already that buy-in to the vision, to the mission, to the
Yes.
movement that we're creating. I'm not having to like, explain to somebody who's completely new to Redeem Her Time, what are we about and what do we do? And so I love that. And it's oftentimes a way for them to get a higher level of access to me that they maybe didn't
Yeah.
feel like they could afford financially,
Yep.
but they're willing to pay with their time. So I
Yes.
love how that can be a win-win for somebody who, wants to be a part of what you do and yeah, maybe just feels like they're not able to financially, invest in that way. So I know this is probably the next question that people ask. Like once they get to the mindset of like, I can't do it all, and it is okay and probably beneficial to start handing tests over. I think the next question that comes up is like, but Brittany, I don't know where to start. Especially if you're so used to doing everything, like where do you even start to figure out what are some of the first few things that you can start delegating, right? What's maybe, and it's probably going to be different for everybody. I don't know if you would say like this is the first type of intern to bring in first, or just how do you determine where you might want to start with either what the role would be or what some of those tasks would be to hand over to someone else?
This is one of my favorite questions to answer because it's so much more simple than people think it is.
Oh,
Everyone
good.
wants to make the process really complicated. So if you want, I'm happy to give your listeners, I have a worksheet that I have put together for my students that everybody loves as a starting point, as a starting place. And it's just called the delegation decoder because it just
Mm.
decodes and simplifies the process. And I'll share three steps. And if you can go through these three, then you're going to likely identify at least 10 to 15 hours worth of content and production and just hours that you get back. And as you get those hours back, you start freeing up so much mental capacity to really dive into the work that you love and serve your clients at a higher level. So, step one, very simply, is to identify what to take off your plate. And kind of the three filters that I use for this, just to get super practical here, is number one, identify what are you doing that is repeatable.
Mm,
So, what are you doing that is occurring with some level of regularity? Maybe it's something you do every single day. Maybe it is something that you do twice a month or once a week. Just figure out what am I doing that occurs on repeat with some level of consistency. So that's filter one. Filter two is what are the things that are draining me? Of
mm,
those repeatable things, what's draining me? This is where so many people like they just start here. They go, oh, handoff. This is the worst delegation advice I've ever gotten. Write down all the things that you hate doing and start with that.
yes,
If you
I've heard
start with
that.
that, it's going to be total chaos because if you don't have some sort of repeatable activity and a fairly consistent process that you follow to do that, it's just going to fall apart because they're going to be constantly asking questions on how do I do this, or if it's something you don't love and you don't have some sort of strategy for how you do it pretty consistently, you're not going to be able to explain it to them in a way that you're going to consistently get high quality results.
Mm, mm,
So and then the third filter with this, so what is repeatable, what is draining you, and what doesn't actually require you. And I feel
mm.
like this is the one that kind of pokes at CEOs the most, especially if you're in that prover mentality of if I can do it, I should do it. It's faster if I do it. Um, and the way you can kind of just ask yourself, hey, how do I know if this really requires me? If something tragic were to happen in your family and you had to step away for 30 days, what could actually still happen without you? Like,
Mm,
right, for you, Lissa, you nobody else can produce your podcast for you from
sure.
a recording standpoint, right? Somebody else could take all of the post production, but they don't have your voice. They can't record your podcast. You could have some guests that would co-host for a while, right? That is a way to do that, but that's your voice. So there are things like that that I keep on my plate. But then I have to go, okay, if I just magically disappeared, or if I had to shut my business down, what could still happen without me? So that's kind of a good filter for that. So that is step one. Anything you want me to dig into further on step one?
No, I mean, I love that. So I've got what's repeatable, what's draining, what doesn't require you. Really good questions,
Yes.
to think through. And I love how you pointed out, and this is something that I've heard as well. So often we want to delegate what we don't like and what we can't figure
Mm-hmm.
out. And sometimes there are those things, but in that case, you're probably not hiring an intern. You're probably hiring like an
Right.
expert or someone who that is their
Yes.
thing. And you're like, I don't want to have to figure this out. But I love that you
Yes.
said, if it's already a repeatable system, now you can teach it to somebody else, right? If you already
Yes.
know what are the steps, what's the frequency, I call it the frequency factor. Now I can
Mm-hmm.
hand that over to someone else to execute, and it's going to be a whole lot easier. So I love that. Okay,
Absolutely.
what's step number two?
Absolutely. Now, and
Good.
to your point, yes, if something is draining you and you're just like, I am not good at this, I don't know how to do this, then you do have two options. You can bring in a contractor and
Mhm.
you can say, you're good at this thing. You take over SEO, do a whole SEO thing on my website. I don't know anything about that. Or that's where you also have room as a CEO. When you start getting your time back and you start delegating the other things that you do have processes for, it frees up time and capacity for you to go, what are some personal development or leadership development, business development things that I can learn? And it improves your ability to do that. And then again, to train somebody later. So a couple of options there. Um, Step two, when it comes to how do I, like, where do I go with taking stuff on my plate? Decide your first type of support.
Mhm.
So there are you figured out, hey, here's my brain dump list of all the things that are repeatable, draining, and they don't require me. I've whittled it down. They fit all three those categories. Then go of those. There are three main buckets that those tasks they're going to fall into one of the three. So it's either going to be an admin or operations type of bucket. So things that are going to be kind of the day-to-day ops backend systems things, content or marketing. So
Mhm.
if you produce long form content and use your voice, do you have pieces where maybe you're repurposing some things or aspects of that content or marketing production process that are in that list that still need to be done that don't require you? And then the third one is student or client support. And
Mhm.
this could be from a paid standpoint or unpaid standpoint, right? Like you might have a free Facebook community or you might have a paid membership portal. So it could be both of those. So looking at of all of the tasks I whittled it down to, if I divide it and categorize it in one of those three buckets, which one of those, which one of those would I be so excited to give away first? And it may be that you pick the one that has the most hours worth to give away, or it may be that this one is of the three, I hate marketing. And so I want to give that away first. That will free up the most mental capacity for me. So it's up to
Mm.
you how you decide to do that. I walk my students through a more in-depth process when we finally get to that point, but that's a really next simple step. So
Yeah, I think that's
identify what
really
to take off your
helpful.
plate.
I love the
Yes.
buckets.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
have
And
something
that's
to put it
easier to
in
see.
yeah, and then when you're looking
Yes.
for that role, there could be a couple different things in that bucket, but they're still the same type of role. And so you're looking for the person who that's the area in which they can execute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you may find that you have 15 tasks that fall under the marketing bucket, and that doesn't need to all be one role.
Mm.
But you may go, oh, I have enough for three different interns here. That's usually what you'll find that hey, I'm starting to see how we can group some of these similar tasks together and turn them into a position.
Yeah.
So when you can identify what to take off your plate, filter it down with those three questions that we went over, and then decide, hey, what category would this fall into of those three buckets? That's going to allow you to say, let me just start simply one position, one one bucket of support. And then step three is start simple and learn as you go. So if
Mm.
you want to start with one intern, the very first round of internship that I did, I brought on two because I had two very different types of roles. And I knew that if I could get somebody supporting me with just a few hours a week on both of those, my interns didn't work more than 4 hours a week. Most of mine averaged 2 to 5.
Okay.
And just having those few hours off my plate significantly increased not just the level of energy that I showed up with in my client calls, but it it gave me almost the permission to say, I'm going to close my computer and I'm going to come back to it when it's time for me to work again,
Mm.
instead of having everything out or having those mental tasks running because I knew something else was off my plate. It was still going to happen even though I wasn't in the room.
Yeah. And isn't that so freeing, right? Where it doesn't all depend on you and you're not the one who has to push every button. There is still that responsibility of making sure that it's happening, but hopefully, as you've done a good job of training them and then also checking in, then
Mm-hmm.
those things are happening. Okay. I love that you said generally 2 to 5 hours a week. Just curious,
Yep.
like, what is the typical length that you bring on interns for? Like, how long do people stay around? Do you give them options to stay longer, or is it already set up as this is a 3 month or a 6 month or a 12 month? What would you say to
Yeah.
that?
Great question. You can do this however you want. I prefer 6 months at a time. I don't really recommend going less than three, because I give my interns 4 to 5 weeks to really go through. They get through the onboarding stuff in the first like 3 to 4 days minimum. It usually doesn't take more than their first week to get through all of the onboarding and training process, and then they have the next 3-ish weeks, give or take, to slowly take on the different tasks that they're going to be doing in my business. And we do an evaluation right at the end of week 4, beginning of week 5, to see how everything is going. I have given them feedback along the way and reviewed some of the things that they're producing, if they are producing any form of content. And then we have that moment where it's like, okay, this is a great fit, or it's not a great fit. Or option three, you are working fantastically, but what if we put you in a different seat
Mm.
on the bus? I think you're doing really great at this aspect. This aspect is a little less, you're a little less gung ho about it. So let's we can change things up a little bit. And that's up to you. But I would say 3 months minimum. I like 6 months. I have had interns stay with me for 3 rounds after each 6 month period, because if I work with a lot of college students oftentimes, and they'll do 6 months and they're like, I really want to do some more. So they'll often stay in their same position, or they might say, yeah, I feel like I've got this down really, really, really solidly. But I'd love experience in this area. And I usually don't, have to re-interview them or take them through that process. I just place them in a new position. And then I know, okay, here's how many positions I have left to fill. So I don't typically recommend less than three or more than 12. And that
Okay, I was
gives
just going to
you
ask, yeah, on that one. Okay.
Yeah, it gives you more flexibility when you have a structured, hey, here's your start and stop date. And then at the stop date, if you want to bring them on again for another round, that is
Mm,
up to you and you can do that. But it gives a clear start and stop time and it helps interns to know, hey, I'm not locking myself in forever and I'm also not going to get cut at some random time.
right. Yeah. And you mentioned having two the first time you did it. So just curious, like how many interns do you typically have at a time?
I typically range between 3 and 6 at a
Okay.
time. Um, and so I love that for me, for the size practice that I run and for the hours that I am willing to put into business. I
Mm-hmm.
very much this year I have taken an extra intentional step to build in more margin at the beginning and end of my workday after I've back from dropping kids off and before I go pick them up, so that our elementary school is maybe 60 seconds from my front door to the front door there.
Okay.
It's very, very, very close. And so I like to have a little bit of that transition time that I didn't have when I was working in my garage with my kids inside. And so I try to build in about 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the day. And so I have narrowed down my hours, and I know within these hours, these are the tasks that have to get done. And these are the additional tasks that I would like to get done if I produce something faster than I anticipate.
Yeah.
So 3 to 6 is kind of my happy spot. It's what I really enjoy working with, and doesn't take it takes me about 10 to 15 minutes max a week to check in with my interns.
Yeah, I love it. You obviously got some good systems down, and so that way it's executing really well. And so I love that you do this. So I always make a joke and say I can take any conversation, turn it back into a time conversation. And I think we've already kind
Yes.
of like we've hinted at this. So let's just kind of like wrap this up as we're coming back to how does this connect back to our time? How does this connect to our ROTI, our return on time invested? We've talked about how it's multiplying your time, your capacity. We're not just here to get more done, although that does help. So what
Yeah.
are some of the benefits when we truly start stepping into this role as a CEO and stop doing everything and start, yeah, leading a team of interns like this?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know we've already kind of mentioned how it allows you to serve your paid students or clients at a deeper level because you have a lot more bandwidth, and you can start improving your client experience. But in addition to that, it really reduces context switching, which
Hmm.
can really steal your focus and take a lot of time to go back from, hey, I was doing this type of task and now I've got to totally switch to this. This is even the case when you batch. So even if you're doing batch work, when you're going back and forth between tasks, I love batching because I can stay focused for a lot longer period of time.
Hmm.
Um, but even when you're going between this type of batching to this one, there's probably a lot of batch work that you're doing that again doesn't require you. And if you can focus in on the tasks that are at your CEO level that are within your zone of genius, within the things that you really enjoy, you have more energy and mental capacity and you're excited to do those things instead of just this is one of those drainers. So those are a couple things. One of my very most favorite things. I had a student inside my program recently tell me, she said, Brittany, I have been, she's been in her business since 2018, I think maybe 2017. And she just told me on a call recently, she said, I didn't just get my time back, I got my vision back. And
Hmm.
she was telling me how excited she was about her business again because she used that in word. She was like, I was just managing it
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
and I'm not just managing it anymore. And so it's really fun for me to hear those kind of comments and the same ones on what we already talked about, like I finally feel like a real CEO. And so when you start looking at that return on your time investment and you can go, wow, with the time I got back, I not only found ways to just do more in that time, but to really enjoy the time I got back, to allow the white space in your calendar or to use some of that. You can do more revenue generating activities if you want to fill a little bit of that time, or you can focus on things like leadership skills and improving your confidence in leading a team and being able to go back and do those little projects that maybe you don't have a repeatable process or system for and start creating those for your next round of internship. So I love that when you get that little bit of time and capacity back, that it just like duplicates and triples and it
Yeah.
it it expands so that you can do even more of that later.
Yeah, it has that multiplication effect versus just,
Yes.
the addition and subtraction. That's why I call it
Right.
kingdom math, right? The Lord has a way of
Yes,
like
yes, I love that.
giving us multiple times, right? Whether it's giving back something or multiplying the fruit of what it is that we're doing. And I love that. I love
Yes.
that. Like she got her vision back, right? It's not just the time
Yeah.
thing, it's the vision, it's the
Yeah.
passion. It's all the things can sometimes get squashed when we just feel like we're buried under a task list that is always more than we have time for. And that we can really hold. So I love this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brittany. This has been a really helpful
Yes.
conversation. I know women are listening today and they're like, okay, I do need support. Okay, yep, I probably can't sustain what I'm doing right now, or I know for the level of growth I want to go into, I'm not, I do need to start expanding and thinking about this, but maybe they're still like, okay, sounds good on paper, but I don't really know where to start. So what would be a good practical next step? Where would you send someone if they want to start
Yeah.
creating more capacity in their business, start leaning into what could internship program look like for them?
Yes. Well, I know we don't have time to go through all of it today. So have just a really short, bingeable, like 10 episode mini podcast series called Scale Without Hiring.
Mm.
That would absolutely be the next place I would send you because in that I break down this full process in much more depth than we were able to hit on today. So you can find that at brittanybraswellrd.com/advantage. And on that page, I have linked up the worksheet and resource that goes with it that we started talking through today
Mm.
about what it actually looks like to identify the things to take off your plate. How do I start categorizing them? And then it allows you to start seeing how many hours could I get, and then giving you that chance to start dreaming and having some vision into what would I do with this time. So that's a really fun series where I walk you through exactly what an internship program is and what it can do for your business and show you what it takes to get a high impact program launched in 10 weeks or less.
Yeah, I love that. I love that getting into the vision because so often we think it's just impossible and going, what if it was possible? What would I do with the time I just freed up? Right. So if you were to ask
Yeah.
yourself the question, just thinking about that, like, what would I do with an extra 5 hours in my week? And I think you
Yeah.
showed us beautifully. We can invest it in other ways in our business. We can invest it in our own personal or spiritual or leadership growth. We can invest it in maybe a ministry or, caretaking or something else that we have. And
Yeah.
just, yeah, that might be a great place for people to start. So what I love to do is I love to get the conversation going over inside the Redeem Her Time community because here's where we take it off the podcast into real life, into real business. And so I would love this will be the question we're going to put out there is what would you do with, a few extra hours in your week? And let's start there instead of worrying about, but I don't know which task and I don't know which, person to hire and all of that. Like let's get you into the vision of being a CEO first. And
Yes.
then I think when you use tools like what Brittany just shared with us, it's going to really help, give you the how do I actually get to freeing up that time. So we'll be sure to link the Scale Without Hiring free podcast series in the show notes. I will make sure to link the Redeem Her Time community in there as well, where you can come and connect with other Christian women business leaders who want to be faithful and fruitful with their time. I allow you to talk about your business any day of the week. And so you can come in and share about what you're doing, what you're promoting, what you're looking for support, connections, things like that. And you never know. Your next connector, collaborator, intern could be in the community.
There you
And you
go.
just need to get in there and start talking. So thanks so much, Brittany, for sharing your wisdom with us today. I know this is going to help so many women who are carrying everything, and whose capacity feels overloaded to start freeing up so that time and bandwidth and do the things that God has in front of them. So I always love ending with a question. From when I was on your podcast, one of my signature questions is, what is it time for? So I always like to ask my
Yes.
guests at the end. This episode, like we said, is coming out early June, right? So as you're thinking about your answer to the question, what is it time for in the season that you're in right now? How would you answer that?
Yes. Well, I actually, June is I'm jumping into a formal mastermind program where I'm really honing in on speaking skills and presentation. And if you cannot tell, I do love to talk. And
I
so
love it.
this is a season where the Lord is calling me to that is the way that I'm going to focus on really creating some impact, hopefully, and adding some value to people when maybe we don't get the opportunity to work together for weeks or months at a time. So I'm really excited to use that as a way to grow impact and also to create a little more bandwidth to have some time with my family as well.
I love it. I can see the roadie that's going to have in your business and who you're able to serve, as well as the time it's going to free up. So I love that
Yes,
focus. So good. Well, keep us
excited about it.
posted on how that goes and where you're speaking. We want to know, so you're welcome to come share inside the community as well. So, all right. Well,
Yes,
thanks
absolutely.
everyone. Yeah, thanks for being here. If you've got a business bestie who, you're like, girl, we need to stop doing it all. Or we really need to kind of lean into what could this look like. I really encourage you to share this episode with a friend, and say, let's do this together. And then we'll be over inside the community to support you. So thanks for being here, and we will see you guys next week.